This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. So, do you need a VPN? Well, do you need or want security? A way to protect yourself while doing basically anything online? Or how about you just want a way to encrypt your data? Or maybe you just want to access some region-locked content on streaming services like Netflix. So yeah, if any of that sounds good to you, well, I think you could do with a VPN. And let me tell you, Surfshark has got you covered. Surfshark VPN will allow you to get all of these benefits and more, with access to over 3,200 servers in over 65 different countries, so that you can be protected online even when on public Wi-Fi. And the best part is, if you're interested in Surfshark and supporting the channel, you can use the promo code sourcebrew and get an 83% discount and 3 extra months for free when you sign up. That comes out to only $2.13 a month. So hit the link in the description if you're interested and use the code sourcebrew. Thanks again to Surfshark VPN. Now back to the Iceberg. Starbean's cameos. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. In the game Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, there exists a shop called the Starbeans Cafe, located in Bean Bean Castletown, which lets you create 7 different types of bean juices, utilizing various beans you can come across throughout the game. And all the different flavors give a unique stat boost, and once they are made for the first time, a cutscene will play featuring the character Egad. However, it was originally planned that each drink would have a cutscene featuring a different popular Nintendo character. Those were Wario, Fox, Link, Olimar, Samus, and even Excite Bike Racer. Not only was the actual text from what each character would say in the cutscene found, but also many of the sprites of the characters as they would have appeared in said cutscenes. And it's thought that these were all cut to further expand the role of Egad in the game. James Bond and other cut characters, Smash 64. For the original Super Smash Bros., also known as Smash 64 for the Nintendo 64, there were a total of 12 playable characters when the game released. However, many fans of these franchises felt that others should have been included, or that some originally were even meant to be in the game but were cut for one reason or another, such as King Dedede and Bowser, who were cut from the game pretty late into development. There were also planned characters that never made it in, such as Mewtwo, and it's even been stated that James Bond, portrayed by Pierce Brosnan in GoldenEye 64, was once considered for the roster, although this was most likely cut very early on in development. Jimmy Hopkins' old voice actor, Bully. In the beta version of Bully, the main and playable character of the game, Jimmy Hopkins, was actually voiced by a different voice actor than what's heard in the final release. Instead of Jerry Rosenthal's performance, Jimmy is voiced by someone else. Who that is, well, we don't know for sure, but it's thought that it might have been Daniel Zaitchik, who did most of the motion capture for Jimmy's character model. Anyway, there isn't much at all, but have a listen.
Alright, I guess I better get changed.
Cut DLC characters, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Before the support for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale ended, there was a ton of DLC characters that were being developed for the game. However, at some point, Superbot Entertainment, the company that was working on the game, ceased working on DLC. And shortly after, the company became defunct. And subsequently, none of these DLC characters that were planned and worked on were released. 4 of the characters that were confirmed to be in development were Dartfeld from The Legend of Dragoon, Abe from Oddworld, Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden, and Tomba from, well, Tomba. Apparently though, a bunch of other characters were considered for DLC, but were never actually worked on, such as Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Lara Croft, Sub-Zero, and many others. Mother 3 Unused Final Boss. The cut and unused final boss of Mother 3 has been the subject of a lot of debate and speculation over the years within the community. This is because some of the battle backgrounds from this cut boss can actually be accessed in the game by using cheat codes within emulators such as Visual Boy Advance. And once the code is activated and a player encounters an enemy, these unused battle screens can be seen, and they are pretty disturbing. This boss battle takes on various different forms of characters and enemies, all with different screens, such as the straw form, vapor forms, elevator form, rope snake form, and more. Makes you think of how creepy the final boss of this game could have been. Pikachu in Conker's Bad Fur Day. As revealed in an early version of Conker's Bad Fur Day, Pikachu was actually planned to make a cameo within the game, and had a scene before it was eventually cut from the final release. The scene was eventually restored and showed what it would have looked like, although it was missing some animations. And funnily enough, it isn't really that inappropriate at all. Just a small cameo appearance showing his tail. That's it really. However, I guess just the idea of one of Nintendo's most popular characters being associated with a rated M game just didn't go over so well, and it was subsequently cut. Samus and Link in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Back when the game Marvel Ultimate Alliance was in development, it was revealed through short gameplay footage that Link and Samus were going to be included as bonus characters, which even showed off their various moves and animations, meaning they were pretty far into development of not only the game, but these characters. I guess they just weren't really too keen on them being put in this game for some reason. But then my question just becomes, why even make them before you have the go-ahead? Or did Nintendo just cancel last minute? Who knows? Although they would have been one of the more interesting inclusions if they had been added. Mike, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. This is one with not a lot of information on it, but that might just make it all the more creepy, really. Basically, in the files of FNAF 2, there was a graphic found within the game's files. A very small image of a crying skull titled simply Mike. Although this was never actually used anywhere in the game, so far as we know, and fans have only been left to speculate on what this could have meant, such as if it relates at all to the characters of Mike Schmidt or Michael Afton. Although there's never really been an answer as to what this is or why it was never used. The Smasher and the Teacher, Dead by Daylight. The Smasher and the Teacher are two unused killers from the early development stages of Dead by Daylight. The Smasher was meant to be able to destroy obstacles on the level, such as trees and walls. Although he was eventually cut, as it would have been hard to balance a character that could actually remove elements of a stage at any given time. As for the Teacher, well, this was either just an unused or potentially a test killer, or maybe just even a joke by the developers. It was first discovered when, in July of 2016, 3 files relating to the Teacher were discovered, those being icons for a new survivor item called Trapple, a killer power called Detention, and a killer perk called Underperform. This was all thought to be for a teacher-like killer, as the developers had announced that their first DLC character would come out in August of 2016. However, the new killer that came out was the Nurse, and the supposed teacher killer was never released, and the files seemingly related to this unused killer were never used. ImperfectCookie.png, Cookie Clicker. Within the files of the Cookie Clicker game, there was found a pretty creepy image called ImperfectCookie.png, which is essentially just a big cookie with someone's face on it, which may have been from a cut feature or was maybe intended to be a part of an Easter egg. There is also some unused code attached to this image, which when executed will overlay the cookie in-game. But that's about it. Dungeons, Cookie Clicker. One of the early features that was cut from Cookie Clicker were the dungeons, which were featured in some of the very early builds, although they could only be accessed through the browser console. Although when the game was officially released, the functionality of dungeons were removed, and although the developers said at some point they would return in some sort of an update, they never actually did. Although they were meant to operate as a roguelike game where you must search rooms, break crates, and fight bosses to collect cookies and loot. And there are a ton of unused files related to this feature, as it was a pretty big part of the game to be cut out. There's chest graphics, doors, map icons, and enemies, not to mention a bunch of code which showed how these systems would have actually worked in-game. Thor the Inventor, A Hat in Time. Thor was a cut character and inventor that would have been found in the game A Hat in Time. However, he does appear in the game, although not in the way he was originally intended to be, as he can be seen as one of the frozen victims inside of Queen Vanessa's manor, although he was actually planned to play a much bigger role, as he would have helped Hat Kid get to Mafia HQ as well as upgrade her weapons. He also had a unique hat called Thor's Cap that was also cut from the game, that would give the player the ability to attack while in the air. However, Thor as well as his cap were removed from the game before its full release. Tim the Time Lord, A Hat in Time. Tim is another character who was going to play a fairly big role in the game before being cut entirely. He was actually planned to be a kind of teacher role and teach the player and Hat Kid, presumably about how the game works, along with its various mechanics. However, as the game shifted to be more platforming based, there wasn't really a need for a character like this, and so he was cut. Although just like Thor and some other cut characters, he also appears in Queen Vanessa's manor. Mizzo, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This was a removed enemy found in the adventure mode Subspace Emissary in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Although in the final version of the game, the Mizzo only appears in the display room of the Battleship Halberd exterior. It's thought that the enemy itself would have been water-based due to its name being similar to the Japanese word for water, which is Mizu. And there were also some animations that were found in the files, although most of them don't work properly. Rosalina's early design, Super Mario Galaxy. This is a pretty simple one, but basically Super Mario Galaxy is the first game that Rosalina appears in. And so as she was a new character, she probably went through many redesigns before they settled on their final design for the game. Although one of the early concept arts has been found, and it's very different from her final look in Super Mario Galaxy. Yeah, I definitely think the final design is better, but what do you guys think? The Blob, Doom. Yes, going all the way back to the original Doom, basically the birthplace of FPS games. Now, the Blob, as he is called, is a planned but deleted monster from the classic Doom, which was revealed from a sprite showing a red skull which would later appear and be used for the mouth of the Pain Elemental in Doom 2. Naughty JPEGs. Naughty JPEGs. SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge. Now, as I've been going through all of these for this video series, we've seen some weird stuff, right? But this, I think, so far definitely takes the cake. So in the PlayStation 1 SpongeBob game, Super Sponge, released in 2001, quite a few unused and cut assets were found within the game's files, and among them were these 3 images. Yes, they were actually found in an official SpongeBob video game, and are labeled naughty1, 2, and 3.jpg. Why these were even included within the archives and development discs, or even made to begin with, is unknown. But there are a bunch of weird stuff found within this game, so maybe that's another story for another time. Toxic Meter, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. This was a simple cut feature from FNAF 2 that would have acted as a way to restrict how long the player could use the mask in the game, as when you put it on, the toxic meter would rise and eventually flash red until if you had the mask on too long, you would presumably die, or get jump scared or something. Although the mechanic was never fully implemented, and all we have from the files is this graphic of the actual meter, and it's thought that this was planned as a way to balance the mask instead of having to have Foxy be able to attack you while wearing it. Steve Ballmer mooning the camera, Halo 2. Now this cut file has a lot of history behind it, even apparently causing Microsoft to lose around $500,000 because they had to have this game re-rated by the ESRB thanks to partial nudity. But I'm kinda getting ahead of myself, so what really is this? Well, basically in the Windows Vista PC version of Halo 2, there was an error that could occur called the .ass error, which would display an image of one of the lead designers mooning Steve Ballmer, who was visiting the Bungie offices during the development of Halo 2. And as a joke, this image made it into the software. And yeah, I think this is kind of mislabeled because it isn't actually Steve Ballmer mooning the camera, he was the one getting mooned, but yeah. Anyway, it was never meant to be accessible by the public, and in a kind of long story with numerous meetings with Microsoft and the ESRB, who are obviously responsible for rating the games, it was decided that further releases had to be delayed to apply new stickers on the cases that included nudity on the label, which was stated to have cost Microsoft around $500,000 for this. Whoops. Monocle Boss, Silent Hill Downpour. So one of the monsters featured in Silent Hill Downpour is the so-called Monocle Man, who appears in only one encounter in the actual game, despite being featured more prominently in early trailers for the game, including what may be a potential boss fight with the character, which can be seen in one of the trailers. Although not much else is known about this, and it's unknown why or when it was cut in development. Tsar Dragon, Final Fantasy VI. There are quite a few unused enemies in Final Fantasy VI, but arguably the most well-known one is the Tsar Dragon, who appeared as an incomplete monster in the game. That includes a sprite and even attacks, although there is no battle script. And besides some basic dialogue that was found from a potential boss fight, not much else is known, although it's speculated that the dragon was intended to be an optional endgame boss. And that was actually kind of fulfilled in the Kaiser Dragon, who was added to the Game Boy Advance port and was given a unique battle script and a different sprite. Fukuda Battle Rifle, Titanfall 2. This was a cut primary weapon that was first showcased in a book, The Art of Titanfall 2, which showed quite a few number of ideas and concept arts that never made it into the actual game. This gun, however, the Fukuda Battle Rifle, was a pretty basic rifle type of design, and not much else is known about it other than the fact that it was probably named after the game's director, Steve Fukuda. Cut Executions, Manhunt 2. Oh boy, so there's a lot to go into here, and I'll do my best to explain it without showing anything too graphic, because believe me, some of these are really graphic and disturbing, and yes, I am already working on a cut and lost content video for the Manhunt games. So I will cover this in a lot more detail in that video, including showing the uncensored executions, but if you want to see them, feel free to look them up. There's a couple of videos showcasing them on YouTube. But yeah, be warned, they are pretty violent. Anyway, so there are a ton of cut environmental executions in the game, so here's the list. Yeah, it's quite a bit, although the vending machine and dumpster executions are the only ones that have been fully restored. The rest were most likely planned and unfinished, as they don't appear anywhere in the actual game. Then there were also multiple weapons that didn't appear in the game that also had cut executions. And yeah, there are a ton. Although some of the animations of these executions for some of these items have been recovered and been restored, such as surprisingly the newspaper. Yeah, pretty interesting. And there's a lot more to this all, so stay tuned for that Manhunt video. Distrust, Danganronpa prototype. Yeah, this was a precursor and prototype of what would become the iconic visual novel Danganronpa, and it was first known as Distrust. And of course there were many other differences as well before it was eventually scrapped and just changed into Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, because it was thought that Distrust was too gruesome, even for being a murder mystery visual novel. Besides that, it's also known that many of the characters were slightly different in design, having different names as well, including the protagonist Makoto Naegi, who was first known simply as Shujinko, which translates to just protagonist in Japanese. There was also apparently an early version of the influence gauge, which was a trust and distrust meter. And also this meter, which would show how the various students felt about the protagonist, was planned to have a huge impact on the game, even determining the murders that would take place, as well as different branching story paths and even alternate endings. There were also more violent executions, including one that was actually found, although I don't want to spoil who it is if you haven't played the game, because there is a very similar death in Danganronpa. But yeah, feel free to check it out if you're interested. Monokuma's original design, Danganronpa. So, you know this guy? Well, if you're not familiar with the Danganronpa games, this cute bear, Monokuma, is kind of the mascot of these games. And you might find it surprising, just like I did, that this was his original design. Yeah, pretty disturbing, and yeah, it does serve kind of the same purpose, being two different halves, I guess. But yeah, it's really no surprise that they changed to this more cute and unassuming design. I definitely don't think Monokuma would be as loved if he looked like this. Meta Kraid, Metroid Prime. Also known as just Kraid, this is an iconic alien enemy appearing in many games in the Metroid series. But in Metroid Prime he never actually appears, despite him being featured in advertisements, Nintendo Power, and even in the game's manual. So what happened? Why isn't he in the game? Well, he was definitely planned to be in it. There's a bunch of concept art, not to mention actual in-game models, and in the level he was meant to appear in as a boss fight, Development was behind schedule, and instead of running the risk of having to push back the release date of the game, the devs decided to finish the level without actually adding in the Metacrade boss fight, and so he was cut just like that from the game. Although it was revealed by one of the artists that designed Metacrade for Metroid Prime that this helmet he's wearing in the concept art would be something involved in the boss fight, as you would have to make objects fall on top of his metal helmet in order to defeat him. Thinner Mickey, Epic Mickey. This was a cut concept that was planned to be introduced in Epic Mickey, in which there would be a form of Mickey that he would turn into if he had used too much thinner or destroyed too many enemies using thinner. This form was called Thinner Mickey, and yeah, it's pretty creepy. Showing Mickey's paint melt off his body, looking like something out of like a creepypasta or something. Yeah, not really surprised this was cut, but hey, it's cool concept art nonetheless. Fun Girl, Yandere Simulator. So this was a mysterious character found within the files of Yandere Simulator during 2 different builds of the game. However, this character was never fully implemented. However, there are various images of her that can be found in the files, such as in a weird Easter egg where you can see different images based on what number is entered in a file called fun.txt, showing a picture of Fun Girl along with a response depending on a certain number, with a pretty disturbing one if you input 666. There are also more responses complete with unique art which can be seen when editing the JSON file. Anyway, there's actually even more stuff you can do with this, with unique responses to certain numbers, and even adding characters in the game using the JSON file, which will actually spawn in the Fun Girl model into the game. And I'm guessing this is all just some sort of Easter egg and something for data miners to find, as she never actually really makes an appearance in the game besides with this, and the developer actually tries to pretend that he doesn't know what people are talking about when they bring up Fun Girl, to I guess keep the secrets and mystery going or something, but yeah. Evil Coco, Crash Twinsanity. An evil version of the character Coco was planned to be included in the game as a villain, although she was removed at some point during development, and besides the fact that she is probably the sister of Evil Crash, not much else is known. And she is only seen in one of the deleted scenes from Crash Twinsanity, where her design is shown and she meets Crash and other characters at the 10th dimension. And in the scene, she is shown to be the opposite of her usual character's personality. Stormcloak and Imperial War, Skyrim. So if you've played Skyrim, you probably remember this. At least maybe a little bit of it. I mean, they kind of make it a big deal in the opening cutscene, but as you go on, the main conflict of Skyrim kind of just fizzles out. And there's not too much really to the Stormcloak and Imperial conflict, as the story went on to more so focus on the dragons and, well, the Dragonborn aspect of the story, fleshing out more of its fantasy elements, with the Civil War story kind of becoming more of a side plot that was heavily cut down by the time Skyrim was released. Sure, there are a couple of missions for each side, and you can choose which side to fight for, but it was planned to be much more dynamic and larger in scale, and some of these cut elements have been found within the files, such as many pieces of cut dialogue which suggest additional missions, as well as just remnants of missions that were going to be used. And apparently there were actually going to be 12 Civil War quests for this storyline, when in reality only 3 of them were used in the final game. There were also going to be payments for various missions, and even city sieges which could take place at various towns and holds throughout the game. There's a ton to look into on this, but let's just say the Civil War we got was extremely cut down compared to what they had planned. Unused vehicles, Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. Not only are there unused areas and weapons, but there are a ton of vehicles that were found in Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, all which can be accessed by using NPC vehicle commands, those being the Z95 Headhunter, the X-Wing, TIE Fighter, TIE Bomber 2, which is I guess an alternative version, Lambda class Imperial Shuttle, and the Rancor. Yeah, quite a lot, and they work as well, which is pretty interesting. So why'd these get cut? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Cut biomes, Minecraft. So if you've played Minecraft, which, let's be real, who hasn't? You know about the standard ones. You've got your beaches, your forests, deserts, tundra, all that stuff. But there was also some biomes that were planned for future updates that were never integrated, and had to be cut for one reason or another. Like for example, the Mountain Edge sub-biome, similar to the Jungle Edge biome, which would generate at the top and edges of mountains. Another example is the Deep Warm Ocean, which is similar to the Warm Ocean biomes. However, these sub-biomes would be much deeper. Clown Heist, GTA 5. Also known as the Sharmuta Job or the Nice House Heist. This is a cut heist that would have been featured in GTA 5 as a main story mission, which would involve Michael and Trevor robbing the mansion of the character Martine Madrazo. And within the file missions.xml, a lot about this mission was found, including some of the planning phases and objectives of the mission, which would have had Michael and Trevor book an appointment and visit the house as potential buyers, which would act as the prep for the heist, before actually raiding the house. And there were also various approaches that were going to be planned for this, just like the other heists in the game, such as a way where it could be done stealthily at night, or alternatively, Michael and Trevor could dress up as clowns and arrive at a part of the house, entertain the guests, and gain access to the stables in order to steal Martine Madrazo's horse, which was one of the objectives, before actually stealing his safe and then his wife, Patricia. And you know, if you've played the game, that Patricia does get kidnapped by Trevor, although that does happen in a different mission, as this heist was scrapped, and most likely pretty early in development too. Although they did apparently like that story beat of Trevor kidnapping Martine's wife for some reason. And interestingly, the Cayo Perico heist, released recently in GTA Online, features a lot of cut content from the Sharmuta heist, such as various characters like Patricia Madrazo, as well as an estate agent named Jackie, who was actually going to help plan the original heist in the story mode. Buster Sword, Final Fantasy X. This is just a pretty quick one, but in the game, Titus actually has the Buster Sword as a weapon, the same one from Final Fantasy XII, but it cannot be accessed through normal means, and was probably planned to be in the actual game, but was never actually introduced. However, it can be hacked into the game using a save editor, which then makes the weapon completely usable in-game. Jimmy Hopkins could die in acid. Bully. Yes, you heard that right. It sounds like some sort of rumor that you hear all the time in Rockstar games. Like, you know, Bigfoot, Leatherface, ghosts, all of that, but none of it's really, well, real, right? Well, it turns out this scene actually was real, although it was cut from the game. The scene itself only occurred during the mission Showdown at the Plant, which is one of the later missions, where the protagonist Jimmy must face off against the leader of the townie clique, Edgar, at the power plant. And apparently at one early stage of development, if Jimmy were to lose this fight, Jimmy would actually die after being thrown into a vat of acid. Yeah, not really something in tone with the rest of the game. Sure, if this was GTA, nobody would bat an eye, but this game is actually rated T. And there was allegedly a cutscene and everything, although that hasn't been fully pieced together, as a lot of this scene and its assets were removed from the game entirely. Although it's pretty clear that this is actually real, as there are still sound clips of Edgar during this scene, as well as some code that also backs up this idea. And yeah, I mean, if it was any other company, you'd probably be very surprised, but Rockstar, yeah, you know how they are. Oilman Original Design, Mega Man Powered Up. Now, I'll be honest here, I'm not really too sure on this one, but I think this refers to the concept art of Oilman, which is slightly different from what his finalized design looks like. Yeah, nothing too crazy, but there are some differences. Unused Endings, Skullgirls. So in Skullgirls, found within the files were a bunch of cut endings from the game which went unused, as these additional endings could not be finished and fully implemented into the story with the amount of people working on the game at Revenge Labs. And so they were all cut. Of all the characters though, Double, Big Band, Squiggly, and Fukua all only had one ending, although Cerebella, Philia, Misfortune, Painwheel, Parasol, Peacock, and Valentine all had cut endings, and the script text of these scenes has been found and can be read online. Although I won't spoil any of them if you haven't played the game, but go check it out if you're interested. Human Pilot, Star Fox 2. Due to another big source code leak at Nintendo, a lot of cool and interesting stuff was found from their properties and games. And among them is a pretty crazy discovery that was found in Star Fox 2, where alongside the other animal-themed pilots in the game, an actual human pilot was found. Which is very interesting, because as far as I know, there aren't any humans in the Star Fox series. And another thing that's interesting is when shown this, one of the game's lead designers, Dylan Cuthbert, said on Twitter, quote, "I don't even remember, as this is all very early on prototype stuff. We switched around a ton of stuff. So maybe it was just an early prototype of a character, but who really knows?" Nightmare Apostle, mini-boss with human face. So the Nightmare Apostles are enemies encountered throughout Bloodborne, which are basically just giant spiders, but even more disturbing are these Nightmare Apostles, with human heads found in the Chalice dungeons, similar to Patches the Spider. But also, apparently there was a Nightmare Apostle mini-boss which also had a human face. Not to be confused with the large Nightmare Apostle, I guess, which is just a larger version, although this one lacks the disturbing human face. Bomb Bomb and Bubbles Retexture, Angry Birds Trilogy. In the Angry Birds Trilogy released on the Xbox 360 and PS3, there are some sprites that went unused in the game, which were actually early designs and textures for two birds in the game, those being Bubbles and Bomb Bomb. Now, Bubbles is in the final game, however he sports a very different design from the one that was found, as this early sprite was a larger one with green polka dots on it, as well as different expressions. And for Bomb Bomb, well, this bird never actually made it to the final version of the game, although his sprite was also found, and he also appears in a concept art. Ending X, Dead Rising 3. In Dead Rising 3, there are multiple endings that you can get, 5 in total in the official game. But there is also a 6th unused and cut ending called Ending X, which is pretty brutal and disturbing, and shows the main character of the game, Nick, being killed by the survivors. And it's thought that this ending would have come about if Nick killed a certain amount of survivors, or even all the ones that you can, although it's not known for sure. But the video of this ending has been found and has been uploaded to YouTube where it can be watched. Mario model in Pikmin. This is a very simple one, just the model of Mario that was found in Pikmin. But I guess this was one of the most detailed Mario models to date, and he even has some visible creases on his outfit, as well as a light brown mustache instead of a dark or even black one. Final smashes in Smash 64. This is really interesting, and I definitely didn't know about this before, but yes, apparently final smashes were already planned, and were going to be included in Smash 64, the first outing in the franchise. Although of course they weren't really introduced until Smash Bros. Brawl. But there are some sounds that were left over, which show they were going to be used in the first Smash Bros., which can be played via the debug menu. Those final Smash audios are for the characters of Kirby, Fox, Pikachu, Captain Falcon, and Ness. The entirety of Time Splitters 2 is inside of Homefront: The Revolution. Okay, now this is pretty strange, but yeah, I've never heard of anything like this being in a game before. Let me know if you've ever heard of anything like this, because I'm pretty curious, but basically the entire game of Time Splitters 2 can be played inside of Homefront: The Revolution, through an arcade machine in the game. Although this would only have the first 2 levels, and it wasn't until a secret code was figured out that the entire game could be played, including story, arcade, and challenge modes. So yeah, this isn't really so much cut or unused content, as it is just like a big Easter egg, which was lost for a while, sure, but it was eventually found, and it can still be played today. And it's also the only way to officially play Time Splitters 2 on PC, so yeah. Bloody Stitched Face, Race with Ryan. Alright, we are definitely getting into the more interesting and weird stuff here at level 6. So this concerns a little racing game from 2019 called Race with Ryan, which is based on the Ryan's World channel on YouTube. And yeah, it's kind of a basic racing Mario Kart type of game. Looks innocent enough, right? Well, take a look at this texture which was found in the game. Yeah. So there's a bloody stitched face of Ryan. Why this was made or why it was in the files is still a mystery. Obviously it wasn't supposed to appear in the game, but why even make this? Was it just supposed to be some kind of morbid joke? I mean, this is supposed to be the texture of Ryan, who is a real-life kid that this is based on. I don't know, it's just kinda creepy. Genocide City Zone, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In one of the many prototypes of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, known as the Simon Y prototype, there was a level which was of course not in the official release of the game, called Genocide City Zone, which was eventually changed to the name Cyber City, and was designed as a mechanical themed area, although before it was finished it was scrapped. However, some of the assets from the level did end up getting used, as well as some of the level design itself, which was used for Metropolis Act 3. Boo Key, Super Mario 64. So the Boo Keys, which is also known as the Big Boo Keys, are unused key-like objects that were going to be obtainable after defeating Big Boo enemies, as shown in early trailers of the game. The key itself has 4 different variants, those being a default yellow key, as well as a red, green, and blue one. Also in the Japanese version of the game, there is an unused texture for the HUD, which would have most likely displayed the amount of keys you had, but of course this wasn't actually used in the game, and isn't even present in some versions of Super Mario 64. As to the purpose of the keys, well, that's just up to speculation, although the keys can still be viewed in the game using codes. Cannon Bowsette, Super Mario Odyssey. Yeah, that's right. Apparently in Super Mario Odyssey, Bowsette was almost actually a thing. At least according to some concept art from the game. And yeah, this art that was shown in an official art book for Super Mario Odyssey predates the meme. So Nintendo was already on top of that, I guess. And honestly, they probably could have made so much money on merch and stuff if they actually did this. But who knows, maybe someday they'll actually introduce a canon Bowsette. Master Ball, Pokemon Go. Now, I don't think this is exactly surprising that this wasn't used, given the monetized nature of Pokemon Go. I mean, a Pokeball that is guaranteed to work might just break this game. Either way, it was almost put into the game, at least at some stage, as not only are there full textures of the Master Ball which were found, but also the ball could be hacked into the game and actually be used, and of course it catches Pokemon 100% of the time, just like it does in the other games. Maybe they will find a way to balance it and reintroduce it into the game, but as of now, I don't really see how it could work. Memos, Mother 3. In Mother 3, there is an inaccessible and removed feature called the Memo menu. This menu would have elaborated and gave descriptions of various things in the game, such as the game's mechanics, pieces of story, lore about characters and locations, and more. And as the player would progress through the game, more information would become available in the memo, explaining the various things that you would encounter. Although at some point in development, this feature ended up being cut. However, the menu is still usable via the debug room, where a lot of these memos can still be read. Kirby GCN models used in Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Return to Dreamland. So Kirby GCN is a term used to describe all 3 or any one of the 3 cancelled Kirby games that were being made for the Nintendo GameCube. Although it's thought that a lot of the material that was going to be used in these games ended up making it into other Kirby titles and even other Nintendo games in some fashion, such as with Kirby's Return to Dreamland, which was a successor to Kirby GCN. However, this entry in the Iceberg refers to certain models which were going to be used in Kirby GCN that made it into other games, like Return to Dreamland, but also Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which I guess refers to Kirby's model, but I'm not too sure on this one. Robo SpongeBob Muscle Pants, Battle for Bikini Bottom. Another pretty big piece of cut content from Battle for Bikini Bottom. This is an unused version of the final boss of the game, featuring a Robo SpongeBob with muscular arms, just like he had in the episode of the series Muscle Bob Buff Pants. The episode itself can actually be played, although in a very glitchy state with a bunch of crashes and such. But it is only accessible in the GameCube and Xbox versions. Like I said, the boss is glitchy and unfinished. He has 2 attacks, but they do no damage to the player. Likewise, you cannot do damage to the boss either. Also, interesting to note, you play as Patrick in this section, unlike the regular version of the final boss where you play as SpongeBob. And these files for this cut fight are also present in the remaster or remake of this game. Smiley Face, Super Mario Bros. 2. A very basic one, but notable because it's actually the logo of the cutting room floor. But it's just simply a smiley face texture which was found hidden within the files of SMB2, and was found in one of the desert stages. And so it's thought that this is just a placeholder texture that they forgot to remove. The Stable, Undertale. One of the many unused assets found in the game is this stable, which is pretty crudely drawn compared to a lot of the other sprites in the game. There was also some code related to this sprite that was found, such as some unused dialogue that is presented as this. But that's pretty much all we know about this. Unused monsters, Silent Hill. In the original Silent Hill, there are many interesting and weird conceptual and planned monsters that were removed or just never made it into the final game. Those being the butterfly monster, the chicken? Yes, definitely looks like a chicken to me. The L, which I guess is a stingray type of creature. The frog, which is pretty creepy. The MKY, which may or may not be a monkey or something. The ostrich, and finally the snake, which looks more like a rat or something, but hey, it was 1999. Besides their existence and models which were found, not much else is known about them. Other than that, a few of them have been designed by Masahiro Ito, known for his work designing monsters for the first 3 games. This is Sparta sign, Portal. So a very strange discovery was found among the many unused textures in Portal's files. A sign texture called wet_floor_sign, which showed a very dated meme reference from like 2009. Shout out to anyone old enough to remember this, honestly. But yeah, it's just a "This is Sparta wet floor" sign. Also, apparently this was featured in Source Filmmaker, which uses a lot of assets from Valve's games. However, that version of this wet floor sign is missing the text and image. So yeah, it's just a plain sign. Torture scene. Conquers Bad Fur Day. So yeah, in case you thought we were done with weird, creepy stuff in Conquers Bad Fur Day, well, now we're back already. So yeah, apparently there was a torture scene that was going to be in the actual game. And yeah, it's not a kid's game, but even still, the developers must have thought that even with all of the crazy stuff in this game, that this was just too much. Much like that insane alternate ending that they had planned. Anyway, while the scene was cut, it was most likely cut pretty late in development, as the voice lines as well as animations for the scene were found, and ended up being put together in a version which can be watched on YouTube. Early Bianco Hills pollution map, Super Mario Sunshine. It's no secret that a lot of Mario games, for some reason, have some creepy stuff hidden in them. And Super Mario Sunshine is no exception to this, especially when we take a look at the early Bianco Hills pollution map, which shows this creepy image. There is also this texture of the goop as well, and an actual model of the map which shows its layout. Pretty basic and definitely something that was done early on in development, but this image, I can see why it remained buried in the files. Duel over Toluca Lake, Silent Hill Homecoming. I couldn't really find any information on this, and I haven't really played any of the Silent Hill games, so I'm definitely no expert. So if you know what this might be, definitely let me know. Unicorn Fountain, Ocarina of Time. The Unicorn Fountain is a later removed and early version of the Great Fairy Fountain found in Ocarina of Time. This would be where Link would get the sword beam as well as be able to heal like a fairy fountain, although this was only in the beta version of the game. And in the final version, this fountain is unused, so it's been subject to a lot of speculation over the years. Pip's Skull, South Park: The Stick of Truth. Found within the GFX files of South Park: The Stick of Truth, the skull of the South Park character Pip can be found, and it's unknown what this texture would have been used for, although some think it was going to be a weapon of some kind. English Seaside, Little Big Planet. This cut location was found in a PS3 dev kit using a regular version of the game, which was shown by A on YouTube, where he shows gameplay exploring the location, which consisted of 3 levels which were found, those being the port, Out at Sea, and the depths, including 2 minigames, Pirate Ship Race and Underwater Jetpack Score Challenge. And a theme called Tea by the Sea was going to be used as the song for this area, although as the location wasn't officially included, it was instead sold in the Music Pack 1 DLC. Scoop Bloop, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. In the press kit material for the release of this game, there were some early screenshots which showed Mario and Luigi as babies, fighting variants of blooper enemies called Scoop Bloops. However, when the game released, these enemies were nowhere to be found, although there is code that was found in the game that suggests that they were supposed to indeed appear, although they were scrapped at some point in development. There were also some sprites of these cut enemies which were found and ripped from the game. Trying to actually spawn in and fight them in the game, however, would softlock or even crash your game. So they definitely weren't totally finished before they were cut. Bike concept art. Mario Kart Wii. Okay, so this is another pretty basic Nintendo concept art one. Essentially just ideas and concepts that never made it into the final game. Such as this page, which shows various different bikes which were planned but were never actually made or put into the game. Beaver animatronic, Five Nights at Freddy's. So Scott Cawthon, the original creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, has been making games for a while. And before he made this insanely popular indie horror hit, he was making a lot, and I mean a lot, of other weird games, among which was called Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. Why am I giving all this lore? Well, because originally Five Nights at Freddy's was going to feature a so far unnamed beaver animatronic, presumably similar to Chipper as the major antagonist. Although Scott did later change his mind, as he wanted the game to have a different identity, and not just be the character from a previous game. However, he was still going to appear, just not as the main one, and would have likely filled the role of Foxy before he ended up just being cut from the game entirely. Wolf animatronic, Five Nights at Freddy's. Another unnamed animatronic planned for the first game, this wolf animatronic was an early concept for the role of Foxy, although that was later scrapped. However, I guess a similar idea was used in the Twisted Ones novel, with the character of Twisted Wolf, as well as maybe even the character of Roxanne Wolf, who appears in the latest edition of the series, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Unnamed Beta Gang, GTA 3. Okay, so you guys probably know by now, but yeah, Rockstar kind of has the most interesting secrets and cut content, let's be real. But seriously, GTA 3 in particular has some real gems. In fact, I'm kind of shocked that Darkle didn't make it on this Iceberg. But that's okay, because one day I plan on covering everything related to that cut character. And trust me, it's one of the craziest things I've ever heard of, even coming from Rockstar. But back to the unnamed Beta Gang. So this was a gang that was cut before the game was finished, although they were featured in a few screenshots of the game early on. However, this unknown gang is thought to most likely be a Hispanic street gang operating in Liberty City. Not too much is known about this gang apart from what we've seen in screenshots, but like everything else found in GTA games, they've been subject to a lot of speculation, from being an early version of the Diablos to an early version of the Triads, or even being possibly a terrorist group, which was thought to be cut due to the widespread effects of 9/11. One of the most popular theories, though, is that the Beta Gang was actually supposed to be the Zaibatsu Corporation, which was an antagonistic crime faction from GTA 2. This is mainly theorized due to posters of the corporation, which were spotted in Chinatown, where the gang was meant to spawn. Orlando and Renzo Caruso, Hitman. The Caruso brothers, Orlando and Renzo, were planned but cut targets from 2016's Hitman, which had a full mission, including voice lines. The in-game briefing describes the pair as the overseers of a notorious drug cartel, and that you will be tasked with eliminating the brothers, as well as finding out why they were in Morocco. And it's not really known why this section was cut, although it's thought to be because it was either too easy or too similar to another mission called The Twin, involving a pair of brothers, although in that one only one of them is the target, making it harder as you have to kill the correct one. Original ending, Mother 3. Okay, so I'm not gonna spoil the ending of Mother 3, so if you want to play it, you definitely can. But let me just say, the ending is pretty dark in its own right, but somehow, yeah, the original ending was going to be much darker, based on some unused sprites of the masked man, as well as statements by Itoy himself, the creator of the game. It's thought that not only this ending, but the whole game would have been much darker when it was originally worked on for the N64. Until that project was cancelled, before ultimately transitioning to the Game Boy Advance in 2003, at which point some of the story elements were tweaked, including most notably this darker ending. Mr. Burns' mansion interior and other unused areas, The Simpsons Hit and Run. There's a ton of cut content from Simpsons Hit and Run, from unused vehicles, to missions, to voice clips, sound effects, music, graphics, models, gameplay mechanics, and of course, areas. One of those being the interior of Mr. Burns' mansion, which can be accessed in the game through exploits or hacks. but there really isn't any interactivity to it at all, as well as a lack of props. However, it's thought that the mansion was originally going to be part of a mission in level 1 at some point, where Homer confronts Mr. Burns. Another area found in level 7, called the 939 area, was cut mostly due to time constraints, and it can actually still be accessed by getting out of bounds, where some leftover assets can still be found. And lastly, there is the Springfield nuclear power plant interior, also found in level 7, which is blocked off in the final version but can still be accessed via cheats. Although there really isn't much at all to this area, and it was probably scrapped pretty early on in the development of this level. Giant Chicken, Portal 2. Okay, Portal has had some weird discoveries and unused content over its lifespan, but I think this one takes the cake. So yeah, there was a giant chicken that was planned to be included in Portal 2. But not only that, some think it was actually going to be a sort of boss fight. That's right, and would even try to attack and kill the player. 5 sounds were actually found related to this cut entity, as well as a HUD icon for the chicken. Although maybe this could all just be a reference to the game F-Stop, which was a kind of cancelled prequel to Portal, which didn't actually have portals, but still involved aperture science testing, and a lot of features and characters and such as Cave Johnson, made it into Portal 2 from this prequel. And there was also supposed to be a giant chicken, who was one of the test subjects in the game, and he is even depicted in a piece of concept art. Pretty wild stuff, even for Valve. Original ending, Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. So again, I'm going to be brief on this, mostly because I've never played this game and I would have no idea what I'm talking about. Broadly speaking though, let's just say this game had a lot of changes and things that were cut, including the ending of the game during development. And there is a huge blog spot going into this ending and what was changed and whatnot. So if you want to check it out, be sure to do so, but all of this goes into the lore of the games and the many characters, so if you're a fan of this game, definitely take a look. Post-game content, Fallout New Vegas. Oh boy, where do I start here? I mean, with regards to cut Fallout New Vegas content, you could literally dive into this for hours upon hours. I mean, just look at these videos. Yeah, these are great by the way. Go check them out if you're ever interested in learning more about New Vegas. But specifically today, we're going to touch on the post-game content which was cut. Because, well, as you'll know if you've ever beaten the game, after you achieve the ending of your choice, it's over. You can't continue to free roam, you either have to load a previous save before the final battle, or just start a whole new playthrough. It wasn't always going to be this way though. Basically, without getting into any spoilers, because if you haven't played this game, you need to play it right now. At the end of the game, the setting, the Mojave Wasteland, completely changes, as well as the locations and factions you encounter. And so that's why the game just ends. However, at some stage, there was actually going to be post-game content. You could continue playing with that playthrough, and the world, factions, and New Vegas itself would be affected by the choices you made during the playthrough, which would have been really cool. There is even a mod for New Vegas called the Functional Postgame Ending mod, which fulfills that very purpose, even giving characters new dialogue and cut lines from the game. Bestiary Test, Terraria. A pretty straightforward one again. This test creature, known as the Bestiary Test, was used most likely for debugging purposes in early development of the Bestiary. However, he is unused in the actual game. Early story levels, Little Big Planet PSP. Through an early alpha build of the PlayStation Portable version of Little Big Planet dated July 29th, 2009, there was found to be a debug feature which granted access to an early version of the story mode, including 3 levels, those being Introduction, Walkabout, and Gift of the Grab, all 3 of which are available for download as of now in an ISO file. Unused Enemies, Mega Man NES series. Okay, so since this covers all the Mega Man NES titles, which there's 6 in total, so yeah, kind of a lot, there's quite a few cut or unused characters from these games, but I will go through most of the interesting ones. For Mega Man 1, there were the Springers, which were first introduced in Mega Man 2, although there was artwork showing that they were actually planned for the first game. For Mega Man 2, there were sketches of a bird enemy and a magnet enemy, which were never actually used. Likewise, Mega Man 3 had various concept enemies, including the Berettan, which was basically a 9mm Beretta handgun, which is kinda wild to be honest for a kid's game at that time. In Mega Man 4, there was an entire unused mini-boss, which would have been a part of the Pharaoh Man stage, appearing as a Sphinx type of boss. Mega Man 5 had a ton of various different assets and animations related to unused enemies, which was mostly made up of bomber-type enemies. But there is more to dig into here if you're really curious, but those were some of the more interesting ones, I think. Mario Tennis Galaxy, Super Mario Galaxy. Within the files of Super Mario Galaxy, a bunch of unused or cut animations for Mario were found, such as similar moves to that of Super Mario 64. But what this entry concerns are Mario's tennis animations, to which he had an entire tennis moveset which was found. Perhaps there was a tennis minigame or something that was planned for Galaxy, but we simply don't really know as of now. Soccer Ball, Battle for Bikini Bottom. A simple model found within the files of BFBB, this soccer ball was an early version of the throwable fruits, which Patrick uses throughout the game, as it can be seen on the same plant where the fruit spawns. It can also be found in many early screenshots from the game, although it's thought that it was most likely a placeholder, unless soccer balls growing underwater is a normal occurrence, I guess. Unused enemies, Super Mario RPG. Now granted, a lot of these are simply palette swaps of other enemies, but even so, there are a lot of enemies that didn't make it into the final version, which were found in the files. And I'll go through some of them right now. There's the Chomp Weed, which looks kind of similar to Piranha Plants, as well as some unfinished enemies that barely have anything attached to them, despite having some animation. And as for palette swaps, there's a bunch. I'll scroll through now so you can see, but yeah, just different colored enemies with slightly changed names, basically. F-Zero AX assets and F-Zero GX. So not only is there code and even assets from F-Zero AX found in F-Zero GX, but there is an actual F-Zero AX game mode found inside of F-Zero GX. And yeah, this all sounds very confusing, I know, but basically F-Zero GX is the GameCube counterpart to the arcade game F-Zero AX. But they're not the same game. Like, they didn't just port an arcade game to the GameCube. They were just being developed using the same code and almost identical hardware, so yeah, very similar games, but not actually the same game. So yeah, you can play the arcade version on the GameCube using cheat codes. Gorilla, Baldi's Basics. This cut character is a little more obscure and not much at all is known about it, other than that in the code for the farm field trip level of Baldi's Basics Plus, there are references to a number of animals in the code, such as a chicken, cow, pig, sheep, and of course the gorilla, which never actually made it into the game. Why this was scrapped or how it would have been implemented still remains unknown. Sunglasses Toad, Super Mario Sunshine. Another basic but cut model from Super Mario Sunshine is known as this internally in the files, and based on the appearance, they seem to be sunglasses, which would be worn by Toad. Although none of the Toads in the game are ever seen wearing these sunglasses. Cut Psychopaths, Dead Rising 4. So in Dead Rising 4, they made the change from calling psychopaths, which are found in all the games, to be called maniacs instead. Although they essentially operate in the same way, being a sort of antagonistic human force that players encounter throughout the game. It can also be noted that Dead Rising 4 has way less maniacs or psychopaths than the rest of the series, which has led to some speculation that maybe some of them were cut during development, or this entry could simply refer to the name change. And wow, that's it for part 3 of this Iceberg. As always, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you stay tuned for part 4, the final part of this unused and cut video game content Iceberg. So far in the pipeline, we do have that manhunt video in the works right now, but I also have a couple of other projects that are in the works, and I'll keep those secret for now. But anyway, this is me, sourcebrew. Thank you guys again for watching, and I will see you with the next one.